All right guys, welcome back to the channel. Captain Jason O'Brien, JOB Fishing. So today we're gonna go ahead and do a short video on one of the questions that I get probably asked the most on all social media and on my YouTube channel, which is rods, reels, lines, and how that I go ahead and rig it all up. So I thought this would be a great opportunity to do it. It's absolutely freezing outside. We do have the Columbus show coming up this coming weekend. About 4 or 5 weeks away, we have the Cleveland show, which JOB Fishing will have a booth. So come check it out. So today, I want to preface this by saying what I'm going to show you guys here today is not necessary to go walleye fishing. This is the way I have it set up. Main reason, efficiency on the water. Last thing I want to do is when I'm sitting in 3 to 4, 5 footers out on the lake is to retie rods and what have you. And the amount of time, I don't want to sit there and waste my time, especially in a tournament. I want to be able to, if I want to go from crankbait rods and switch over to doing bottom bouncers or drifting or whatever, I simply just take a rod out of the box, take the rod sock off, and put a lure on. That would be the main reason. Other reasons why I have it set up this way, one is kind of lazy. I don't want to sit there and switch up all the different stuff on the rod to change the style of fishing that I'm doing. And 3, probably the most common of all of us is that disease we have. It's called fishing, and we love buying gear. So that being said, let's take a look. All right guys, let's start off with my #1 used rod and reel setup, which primarily is for spring, fall brawl, and most of the tournaments. Reason why is on this, well, let's go through it. First, this is a Shimano Dakota A 500 line counter. It has a power handle on it. It has a 6.3 to 1 gear ratio. It has 24 pounds of drag, and it pulls up on one rotation of the handle 38 inches of line. So I paired this up with a Talora A. It's an 8-foot medium power with a moderate fast action. So a couple things, guys. One, when I'm trolling planer boards, whether they're inlines or large boards, I try to keep all my equipment the exact same so that I can control the variables. So I try to keep the same rods, same reels, the same line, same everything. So, and that way it helps me reduce the amount of variables so I can keep everything consistent and dial in, the bite. So another thing is, let's go back onto line. So my #1 thing is, guys, I use Precision Trolling app. On the Precision Trolling app, they use Berkley XT 10 pound, which has a diameter of 0.014 of an inch. So to try to keep with the dive charts, I try to keep that same diameter line, regardless if I'm using monofilament, fluorocarbon, or braid. So on this particular setup, what I have is the Sunline Supernatural, but I'm able to go up to a 16 pound on the monofilament because of the 0.013 diameter. Then I have it coming down to a bead. I always try to use, I don't know if you guys can see that. There's a small bead there. So there's a gold bead, 8mm plastic. A couple of reasons why I do this on my lines, guys. One, it helps protect the eyelet at the tip of your rod. 2, if you're fishing, especially like in weedy water, the idea is that this catches a majority of that before that weed slides down the line to your actual bait. So from there, then it goes to, I have a swivel. So on my swivels, I typically use a Spro ball bearing #2. I find that these work better than the barrel swivels. They don't foul up. They don't get as gunked up, and they keep on spinning and doing what they're supposed to do. So from the swivel, I come into a 48-inch leader that I like to do on my crankbait rods. Now, this leader line, I use a Seaguar 25-pound fluorocarbon. So one, it doesn't have stretch. Two, it's pretty tough. And it's the, actually the Seaguar Abrazex, so it's abrasion resistant. The other thing I like about this line is it's very stiff. So it wants to keep the line straight so that when I'm letting out line from the boat, it helps prevent fouling up the actual baits coming back on the actual line. And then I finish it off with a number 3 Eagle Claw dual snap, which goes straight to the bait. So that pretty much sums up my crankbait rods, guys. The only thing is with this particular setup, with the thing you got to keep in mind though, it is a power for reel. At 38 inches per revolution, you can really take up some line, and with the strength of this reel, you can really bring in some fish pretty quickly, which can cause you to lose some fish. So you got to slow, especially if you're trolling faster during the summer, you got to slow your roll down when you're using this getup. So. All right, guys, so that brings us to the next setup. This is something I would consider to be my summertime go-to setup. So I have a Dakota conventional 300 line counter on here, and it's paired up with an original Telora. It's an 8'6" medium power, moderate fast rod. And the reason why I've gone to this more so for the summertime is it's got less power. This has got like a 4.2 gear ratio. You're only pulling up about 25 inches of line per revolution. Instead of the big power handle that you have on the 500 Dakota A, you have the bi handle on this here. I mean, it's a fantastic, you're not using near as much line on the 300 as you do the 400 or the 500s. As far as the actual line's concerned, it's the exact same as what I have on my my tournament rod. So I'm using, again, a Sunline, 16-pound, supernatural, monofilament going to a bead, and a number 2 Spro swivel, going to a 48-inch Seaguar Invisex fluorocarbon leader to a number 2 Eagle Claw duo snap going directly to the bait. So the reason why I use this rod and reel for the summer is it's bringing the amount of power at the reel down compared to the 500 line counter, which I enjoy. It makes it a little bit more sporty when you're out there. And typically, you know, when we're especially when we're fishing the Western Basin during the summer, the fish typically are a little bit smaller than they are in the spring and the fall, and this just works really, really well. You still, it keeps it fun, but you're not over. You know, I find when you're catching 18 to 22 inch in the Western Basin in the middle of summer, that the 500 line counter can take the fun out of it sometimes. So I have a set of these specifically set up just for the summertime walleye bite. All right, guys, so that brings us to my Dipsy rods. So the big difference between this setup and my summer setup is the rod lengths are different. The reason being is because the lines are going in at such a small angle or region in the water to prevent tangles and line crossings. I typically have I have my rods set at different lengths. So my outside, which would be my number 3 setting on my Dipsy, is a 9-foot rod, and then I come into an 8-foot rod on my 1.5 foot or a 1.5 setting on my Dipsy, and then coming into my 0 setting, I have a 7-foot rod. So I go 7, 8, and 9. And the reason that, and what that does is it brings the entry at the water and it separates the line so that it prevents any tangles. All right, guys, so as far as the rod, so yes, we have 7, 8, and 9, but I've gone up to a medium heavy power, which gives us a little bit more stout backbone to handle the Dipsy divers. and I've gone to a medium action. So it's still giving you lots of flexibility in the tip, and it's more of a parabolic bend, but it's got lots of power behind it. Now, as far as the spool is concerned, we're going back to the Shimano, the Dakota 300 line counter. Big difference is I'm using a Suffix 832 braided line, and I use a high vis so I can actually see the lines, because a lot of times the line angle into the water is going to tell me if one of my Dipsies have been tripped and it's pulled backwards, with a diameter of 0.014 to keep the dive charts the same. So the big difference is what I typically do, guys, is this is the way my rods are put away. So what I've done is I've gone on to, I think it was Amazon, and I found all these wire ties. It's just a Velcro, and it just holds the Dipsy close to the rod so it's not banging around during transport in your rod locker. And then typically what I've done is I'll wind this up around the reel, and I have it the snap on the actual eyelet. So what I have here, guys, if you can see that, is again, I have the 8mm gold bead, I have a swivel, that's actually a bearing swivel, Spro, and then this is the actual swivel that comes on the actual Dipsy diver itself, okay? So it gets connected to the Dipsy diver. So again, coming from the Dipsy, it comes with another swivel, and this here, this is an actual snubber. I think it's about, I don't know, 6-inch snubber, Great Lakes snubber. It gets connected with a snap. And again, I have my leader. All right, guys, so what I like to do during the winter is tie all my leaders, and I use different lengths depending on what I'm actually using it for. So I typically use the 25-pound Abrazex Seaguar fluorocarbon for the actual line, and I always have the number 2 or number 3 Eagle Claw dual snap on both ends of the leader. Now, I'll tie 48-inch, I have 60-inch, I have 72, and those are pretty much my go-to. So whenever I'm actually got, if I'm trolling, if anything behind a diver and I'm going to a crankbait, I might go with a little bit longer, like a 72-inch leader. If I'm doing spoons, and depending on if, or you know, in shallower water, I'll try to go to a shorter leader, to like a 48-inch leader. And of course, I use 48s on my my crankbait rods as well, coming from the swivel. So that's about it. When it comes to the biggest difference is I'm using braid on the Dipsies, going from the spool. And again, guys, when I'm spooling out braid, I put a monofilament backer on the spool. So I'll put on maybe about 100, 200 feet of monofilament. Then I'll do a double uni to the braid and then finish spooling it up. Now, when it comes to tuning your line counter, whenever it comes to the Dipsy divers or any weighted or any other diver outside of a crankbait, your tune on your line counter becomes very important. If you go to the Precision Trolling app, you will see that you know, if you have an extra 50, if you have 50 feet too much on this, it could be significant when it comes to your depth. Whereas on the crankbait rods, if you're off by even 50 to 100 feet, that might not even be a full foot of depth as far as your lure is concerned. So when it comes to your Dipsy divers or any other diving rod that you're using, make sure that your line counters are dialed in. Otherwise, you could be losing a lot of baits if you're getting right down on the bottom. But other than that, guys, that's pretty much it for the Dipsy rods. That's how I have them set up. All right, guys, so before we move over to the other side of the garage and review those rods, this is the setup that I use on Daredevil. This would be primarily used on the large planer board system. And what we have here is a Dakota A 400 line counter. It's got a 6.6 to 1 gear ratio. It's got about 35 inches per revolution as far as retrieval, and it's got about 20 pounds of drag. So it's not as powerful as a 500, but it also has a little bit less line capacity, which is good as well. As far as the rod's concerned, we've really stayed with the Talora A with the 8 foot. It's a medium power, and it has a fast, moderate fast action on it. All right, so one of the differences on this rod and reel setup is I've used a Cortland Master braid. So again, I've used a high vis 40 pound 0.013 diameter. But the reason why I've gone with this braid, one, it comes in bulk spools. I think it comes in like 3,300 yards. And the other thing is I found that this particular braid is tough as nails. As far as like, it actually doesn't fade. It holds its color. It's just a really good all-around braid as far as durability is concerned. So what we do is we come down again, let me put this down. So again, we come from the braid directly to my number 8 gold bead to protect the eyelet and to prevent weeds. And then I come into a ball bearing, a high quality stainless steel ball bearing and snap combo. And the reason why I've gone to this, guys, on these particular rods is from this snap on, the different things that I've done is we go ahead with, we go with from this snap to a leader directly to a deep diving crankbait. Or I can go directly to a jet diver, a 40 true trip or a jet diver, and then from the true trip out to a crankbait, floating crankbait with a 30 or a 48, 60 or a 72 inch leader. Or I can go to directly from this to a inline weight, and then from the inline weight, again, I could go to a floating crankbait or a spoon or a worm harness. So the nice thing is, regardless of what style of fishing that I'm pulling behind the large planer boards, I have the same rods and same reels and same line. The only thing that's really changing on the style of fishing is from this snap and beyond. But that's pretty much it. Again, the only other thing with this particular reel, instead of having the lever bail release, it has an actual thumb, more like a bass Baitcaster. It's got the rear thumb bail release. But other than that, I absolutely love it. Fits nicely in your hand, as you can see. It's almost like using a heavy duty Shimano Corrado bass Baitcaster on a trolling rod. That's about it. We'll move over to the other side. All right, guys, so to stay with trolling, rods first, let's take a look. So this rod and reel setup that I have here is primarily what I use for worm harnesses, whether I'm trolling them or if I'm casting or if we're drifting bottom bouncers or whether we're doing inline weights, what have you. Reason why is I consider it my finesse trolling rod. What we have is a Shimano Dakota A 300 line counter. It has pretty much the exact same specs that the 400 line counter has. The only difference is, as you can see, it has the bi handle versus the power handle. So I find that this actually, even though it says it actually does 35 inches per revolution, I find that it's a little less powerful. And then of course it's got less line than the 400 it has as well. So along with this reel, what I've done is I've actually paired this up with a Denali Myrid 8 foot fast action rod. Absolutely love this rod. It really does I mean, this here, I mean, whether you're trolling or you're drifting, bottom bouncers, or just inline weights or what have you, it's a super sensitive rod. You can feel those ticks, drop back the lure, and really sweep up on those strikes. But this is a fantastic getup. It's probably one of my most favorite rod and reel setups. So again, what I have on this particular rod, because I do a little bit more casting on this rod, I've gone to a Power Pro Super Slick V2 braid. So it's almost like a coated braid, so you have a better casting. It's got less noise on the retrieval coming through the glides. But again, it's a high vis, it's a 40 pound, so it's a 0.013 again, as far as diameter. And again, the way I have it set up is kind of similar to my large planer board setup. So I have braid coming to a 8mm bead, going to a swivel / snap. So off of this snap, you could go to, like I have shown here, an inline banana weight to bring down your harness, or you could do a bottom bouncer, or you could do an offshore tadpole, or you could do a mini Dipsy, actually a 030 Dipsy diver on this to help bring down that worm harness. But again, the only thing that's changing is from that swivel on, and it'll go to a diving device and then the harness, depending on what method of worm harnessing, whether we're drifting, we're casting, or trolling on planer boards. With that, so the only thing that would actually change is what's beyond that snap. But again, guys, this is that 300. I mean, it literally feels like a old Corrado. I know I'm actually looking in the screen. Anyway, this actually feels like an actual bass rod. You have absolutely awesome control on this particular rod and reel. All right, so that brings us to spinning reels and rods. All right, guys, so this is my go-to walleye jigging setup. And what I have is a Stratic carbon. It's a 2500 series Shimano reel, and it's on a Crucial rod. And again, this is a 7-foot medium heavy extra fast rod. So the nice thing with this is this is actually a very super sensitive rod. However, it's got a tremendous amount of backbone to it. So when I'm doing 1 ounce or 1.25 ounce jigs, or even 3/4 ounce jigs, along with some of the larger walleye on the reef structure in the spring, this is here, I'll get back up. Actually, you can see that this is a really super nice rod and reel. It's probably one of my favorite jigging rod and reel. So any of the spools that I have braid on, I always back it with mono first, double uni, and then fill up the rest of the reel. On here, I got 20-pound Super Slick Power Pro V2. It's real thin, it's got a coating on it, it casts like a champ. And then what I do is I come down, and then I put a #1 tiny, you can barely see that, swivel, little ball bearing swivel. Actually, that's a barrel swivel, but yeah, it's a little tiny swivel. And then I go to a 10-pound fluorocarbon Abrazex Seagar leader. Now this here, I typically will only do 24 or 36-inch leaders. Attached to this fluorocarbon leader, I put a very small snap. It's like a #1, more like a crankbait rod snap. And that's pretty much it. Off of this, I can do hair jigs, blades, bladed jigs, or what have you. So this would be my go-to Walleye jigging rod. All right, moving on to the next spinning gear setup I have, guys. This is the rod and reel setup that I have on the large boat. This is for perch, also for walleye, jigging, casting, drifting. The nice thing about these reels, it's a Shimano Spyrex 2500. Nice thing is it's got the quick release bail, one finger trigger, and it has the self-centering bail. So really nice reel. It's pretty light. Now it's teamed up with Shimano's brand new SLX spinning rod, which is a fantastic lightweight reel rod. Again, this is a medium heavy with a fast action on it. So guys, even when I'm doing perch fishing, I'm using typically the long pencil weights, and those are anywhere from 1 to 1.5 ounce. So when you're doing that all day long, you need a pretty significant tip on this reel. Along with, if we're doing jigging for walleye, we're using a Venom hair jig, and it's typically somewhere in that 1 ounce, 3/4 range. So, I mean, again, depending on the depth and the winds and the current will dictate what size weights we'll go to. But this rod and reel, regardless of the weight, will handle it no problem. But again, we have this rated with Power Pro Slick, 20-pound. V2, and it's backed with mono on the spool. And then I have about a 16-foot fluorocarbon leader. I go to a 10-pound in a Brazex Seaguar. And then on that, I have a very small, let's see if I can get this in focus. There we go. Ball bearing, like a #1 snap. And the beauty behind this is, regardless if I'm using a hair jig or if we're using a pencil weight or what have you, regardless, we can just attach it to this and it's ready to go. All right, guys, so that brings us to, I have 7 Baitcasters. These are the rods that I'm typically using for either jigging, pitching, or what have you, casting up on the banks, depending on what type of fishing we're doing. So again, all 7 rods are pretty much the same reels. They all are the Chronarch 150 series, the carbons and the magnesiums. Again, they have the bifold handle, the actual click, thumb click in the bed. So this is very similar to a bass reel. And I have these set up on the Crucial rods. So the difference between the 7 rods that I have are they all have different lengths. So they range anywhere from 6'6" up to 7'3". They range anywhere from medium power up to medium, actually to heavy power. Everything from, I have a couple of glass rods that have a moderate or medium action up to a extra fast action. So depending on if I'm throwing square bill crankbaits or a jerk bait, or if I'm doing jigging, drop shots, any other type of style fishing, whether I'm dragging tubes for smallmouth bass. So these are absolutely deadly little combos, primarily made, used for bass, but I end up using these a lot for walleye as well, depending on if I'm on inland lakes or if I'm bashing shores, or even, as you can see, a Venom hair jig in Lake Erie. So on all these Baitcasters, I primarily have, I think there's like 2 or 3 of them that actually have the super slick, actually it's got a 40-pound braid on it, so it's back to the .013, but it's the Power Pro Super Slick V2, and then of course I go to either a swivel. Most times I'll probably do a double uni knot connecting the braid to the fluorocarbon leader, and then I'll have a small, you can see there, a small little snap, or I'll tie directly to the lure. The other 4 rods I have are all, they're spooled up with 15-pound fluorocarbon, and those are going directly to without a swivel and without a snap and going directly direct tide to the baits. That's pretty much it on the Baitcasters. All right, so the only ones I got left are my large musky rods. So these are primarily used for casting. I have 3 different lengths. I use the Okuma EVX rods. So these are heavy duty, extra heavy duty, and fast tips. I use the Shimano Tranx 300 and I spool that up. Obviously I put the mono backer on it, double uni, and then I go to a actual 60-pound Power Pro Slick V2 braid, and that will go to a heavy duty fluorocarbon leader. So when I say heavy duty, these range, they're about 12 inches long for my casting. They're anywhere from 40 pound, I have 80 pound, and I have 120 and 150 pound tests. So depending on if musky, northern pike, what have you, casting, this will be primarily you'll have an actual swivel, ball bearing swivel on it. And all these fluorocarbon leaders are all hand crimped and made with a heavy duty snap at the end to hook your lures up. Now, if I'm actually using these rods for trolling for musky, I'll go to a larger fluorocarbon leader. I'll go to a 24 or a 36-inch long fluorocarbon leader. But other than that, that's pretty much it, guys. So again, I have, as far as lengths are concerned, I have an 8.6, which is probably my shortest musky rod. I have an 8.6, a 9, and a 9.6. And the reason for that, if you know musky fishing, that's so you're not breaking your back up in the bow doing figure 8s all day. Well, that's pretty much it. So, all right, guys, so that pretty much wraps it up. Just wanted to go through my rods and reels and line terminal tackle setup that I have for JOB fishing and answer some of the questions I've received over the course of the last year and a half on social media and YouTube. So I hope that answers any questions. If I missed anything, go ahead, comment below. Otherwise, the only other thing, reminders, I will be at the Columbus show this weekend. JOB Fishing will be at the Cleveland Boat Fishing Expo, which will be March 17th through the 20th. We'll have a booth. Along with, I will be conducting a few seminars as well throughout the show. Other than that, guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, smash the like button, hit the notification so that every time I post a video that you're notified. If you have any questions, comment below. Otherwise, guys, I'll see you next time.